I'd like to call this council and committee meeting to order. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people. We are the beneficiaries of ancient agreements, such as the dish with one spoon, between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who agreed to share the abundance of the land through peace, friendship, and mutual respect. The two-row wampum, by which the Haudenosaunee welcomed the settlers and agreed to share the land in mutual respect. And the Treaty of Niagara, considered a fundamental document by First Nations in all future relations and treaties with the British. We recognize that we have a responsibility to be stewards of the land in cooperation and collaboration with the Indigenous people, not only for one generation, but for all generations to come. We understand that we have an obligation to learn the lessons of our history, educate ourselves about the experiences of the Indigenous people, and seek opportunities to heal the wounds that will result in reconciliation with our Indigenous sisters and brothers. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people live and work in Fort Erie. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We have the good fortune to live in a land of such abundance, diversity, and beauty. Let us be vigilant in protecting Turtle Island. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present. Mayor Redekop.
Thank you. There is no addendum this evening, just some very brief announcements. I want to wish all Irish residents of Fort Erie and all those who have Irish ancestry and all those who wish they were Irish, happy St. Patrick's Day. I fit into all three of those myself. I also want to say that we've been working on putting together a community cleanup program, and the council passed a resolution several months ago. I understand that our staff, led by the CAO, has been looking into obtaining information and data relative to the resources that we would need in order to do that. We have a number of organizations and individuals in town who have expressed an interest in participating in a formal program, a cleanup program, and so I will be trying to get some groups together again this year for Earth Day, and anyone who's interested in participating in a group who's interested in participating should contact my office either through my email address, which is wredekop@forterie.ca, or by calling the town 905-871-1600, and either connecting with my assistant Diana Kelly, whose extension number is 2236, or me personally, my extension is 2235. And then finally, I want to acknowledge that on March the 4th, I attended a ceremony in Niagara Falls hosted by MP Tony Baldinelli, where he recognized and gave out the King Charles III Coronation Medal to a number of individuals. This is an award that recognizes outstanding service and efforts by individuals in our community or the province or the country, and recognizes and celebrates the ascension to the crown of King Charles III. The Fort Erie recipients on March the 4th were Anna Annunziata, Catherine Denahauer, and Rick Doan, all of whom are very well known in our community, and certainly their service is well recognized. I attended a similar ceremony on Saturday, March the 15th, and I'm really honored to say that my wife, Kathy, was recognized for such an award, and we had to receive the medal on her behalf in her absence. That takes us then to declarations of pecuniary interest. If there are none, we have some upcoming public meetings. The first has to do with our tree bylaw, which is under review, and that is going to take place here in the town hall in the atrium on March the 19th, 2025, from 5 to 7 p.m. There's a notice attached to our agenda that deals with that. And the other public meeting, open house, that I wanted to mention relates to Climate Change Action Plan draft report that staff is working on. That meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 27th, 2025. Again, 5 p.m. That'll be in the council chambers. Sorry, just looking at the other one, that's in the council chambers as well, the tree bylaw one. Okay, that takes us to public meetings. We have a public meeting this evening with respect to 3741 Nye Road. It's an application for a zoning bylaw amendment. The process for that involves council receiving background information from a member of our staff. This evening, that will be Robin Shugan. She will then be subject to any questions that council might have at that time. When she's finished, the developer or the developer's agent will be provided an opportunity to address council and respond to any questions that we may have. Following that, I will ask if there's anyone who wishes, other than the proponent, to speak in support of the application. Anyone who is subject to questions by council. I'll ask Cole Patton if there's anyone in the digital waiting room, if there's anyone that wishes to speak in support. And then we'll go to anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application or who has questions of council. They may come forward. Same process, same request of Mr. Patton about anyone in the digital waiting room. When that is finished, I'll then go to the clerk to see if there's been any late correspondence to the town that hasn't been included in the report that is part of our agenda this evening. And once that's been done, unless there's something that arises, I'll declare that public meeting closed and we'll move on to deal with the report, PBBS 17-2025. So, we'll start the meeting. Good evening, Ms. Shugan.
Good evening, Mayor Redekop. Okay, good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, members of the public. My name is Robin Shugan. I am the Intermediate Development Planner with the Town of Fort Erie. The purpose of this presentation and public meeting is to provide information for Council for proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the lands municipally known as 3741 Nye Road in the Town of Fort Erie. The agent representing the applicant is Rochelle Larocque from Biglieri Group on behalf of the owner Brent King. The subject lands are proposed to be rezoned from the residential 1 zone to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone. The site-specific regulations being requested for reduction in lot frontage, a reduction in lot area for townhouse dwellings, a reduction in landscape open space, and a reduction in parking space stalls. Notice of today's public meeting was provided in accordance with the Planning Act by placing a sign on the subject lands and circulating public notice of public meeting by regular mail on February 24th, 2025 to all registered property owners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands. So here we have the development application process. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment application is subject to a 90-day processing and review timeline that begins the day the application is deemed complete and will stop the day council makes a decision on the application. Right now we are at the public meeting and information report stage and day 51 of the 90-day timeline. The subject property is located in the Ridgeway Thunder Bay secondary plan area of the Town of Fort Erie on the south side of Nye Road. The surrounding land uses of the subject land. So to the north, we have single detached dwellings and the draft approved Creekside subdivision. To the east are residential single detached dwellings. South, we have woodlands and residential single detached dwelling with the Royal Ridge subdivision. And to the west is residential single detached dwellings. The subject lands are located approximately 800 meters south of the Ridgeway downtown core and approximately 1,000 meters from Beaver Creek Park. The site is an irregularly shaped parcel of land with an approximate lot area of 2,888 square meters and an approximate lot frontage of 28.48 meters. And this is a view looking south onto the subject lands. A view looking north to the east and to the west. The subject lands are designated low-density residential and are within the Ridgeway Thunder Bay secondary plan area of the town's official plan. The low-density designation allows for additional areas to be considered medium-density residential development, subject to a zoning bylaw amendment and meeting one of the 4 criterias is 1, within walking distance of the downtown core mixed use, 2, within walking distance of the Gorham Commercial Gateway, 3, along arterial and collector roads within the secondary plan area. 4, within close proximity to amenity space such as parks, open space trails, and natural features. Planning staff will provide a full analysis at the recommendation report stage, and no amendment to the official plan is proposed. The subject lands are currently zoned residential 1 zone. The applicant seeks to rezone the subject lands to a new site-specific residential multiple 1 zone. Okay, here we have a chart to illustrate the required RM1 provisions and the proposed provisions of the site-specific RM1 zone. The applicant is seeking relief from the required minimum lot frontage of 50 meters to 28 meters, a minimum lot area of 300 square meters per dwelling unit to 280 square meters per dwelling unit, the minimum landscaped area of 50% to 40%. The current zoning bylaw requires 1.5 spaces per each dwelling unit and 1 additional space for each accessory dwelling unit, totaling 23 required parking spaces. Through review of the proposed site plan and discussion with the applicant and the agent, the proposed reduction of the parking stalls to 1.25 stalls per unit may not be necessary, as the concept plan shows 24 parking spaces. The applicant and agent have considered removing the requested relief, subject to the comments from council, staff, and the public. Planning staff will provide a full analysis of the proposed site-specific zoning at the recommendation stage. This is an illustration of the conceptual site plan. The site plan proposes 2 blocks of 5 townhouses, 10 units in total. The proposal may accommodate 8 accessory dwelling units based on the number of parking spaces provided. The block townhouses will front onto a private road. A 6-meter private amenity space is provided for each unit in the rear of the dwelling units. The townhouse units will have double-car driveways for a total of 20 parking spaces to accommodate the townhouse dwelling units and 8 accessory dwelling units. 4 visitor parking spaces will be provided on the east of the parking area. And the proposed development will also have a 3-meter landscape buffer strip along the west of the private road and parking area. A 5-meter wide sanitary easement is located on the east side of the subject lands that services Royal Ridge subdivision. No development is permitted on this sanitary easement. And here we have a conceptual elevation for the proposed townhouse blocks. As part of the application submission, several studies were required as part of the proposal: an archaeological assessment stage 1 and 2, functioning service report, an environmental impact study, planning justification report, and a tree inventory protection plan and arborist report. A public open house was held February 5th, 2025. The notice of open house was sent to property owners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands. Town's planning staff, agent, owner were in attendance. Approximately 15 members of the public were in attendance of the open house. Comments that were commonly identified were regarding density, servicing, flooding and ponding, as well as traffic and road conditions. And this concludes planning staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shugan. Any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Robin. In regard to the private road, how big is that private road going to be? I couldn't really tell on the...
Let's go back. I also cannot see, sorry, through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the site plan in front of me, so I can't exactly tell how wide that road widening is, but it looks like it is indicated on the site plan.
Okay, thank you. And one further question. The existing sanitary easement, I'm assuming that's is that the red marking
Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes, the red is the private driveway, and I believe the red indicates the turning radius.
Okay, so where is the easement then?
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes, the easement is on the east side of the property, along the rear of the amenity space.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Christensen.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Shugan. Nye Road, although it's a collector road, is not particularly wide or urbanized, and this is a significant change in the density. What, if any, provisions have been made to perhaps accommodate the level of traffic that would be coming out of this proposed development along Nye Road?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Christensen. The Nye Road is planned for future improvements that will go up to full urban standards, which includes sidewalks and improving the road.
Are you aware of what the extent would be? Would they go out to Gorham Road, or are you aware of that?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Christensen. At this time, I'm not aware, but we will find that out for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions? I've got a couple of questions. So on the parking issue, I wonder if you go to the slide where you had shown what's proposed. Okay, so if there are 20 parking spaces and there are 18 units, that would be just a shade over 1.1 parking spaces per unit. So how does that comply with proposed zoning?
To you, Mayor Redekop, the proposed zoning, so the required amount of spaces is 23 spaces in total. The proposal is to have 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, or per townhouse dwelling unit. One will be for the residential, the main dwelling unit as the townhouse, and then one for a possible ADU. So in total, it's in area that the parking meets.
So the 2 parking spaces in the 8 units that will have a main use and then an accessory dwelling use, they'll have 2 parking spaces, but this calls for 2.5. They're proposing 1.25 times 2, which is 2.5, but it's really only 2. So there are 4 parking spaces put someplace else on the perimeter of this, and they're designated, at least the report makes reference to them as being visitor spaces. So they're really, I'm just a little concerned about whether there's adequate parking or not. The other question that I had is this particular graph shows the shows what the RM1 zone regulations are, and that's required, and what is being proposed. But we don't know what the current zoning standards are. It's currently zoned R1, I believe.
Through you, Mayor Redekop, that's correct.
And we don't have that information here, so I don't know what we're going from and to. So I mean, I know what we're going to, and I know what's being proposed is less than what we're going to. I don't know where we're coming from with an R1 zone. Can you provide that to us before we get to the recommendation report?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, the RM1 zone permits single detached dwelling units.
I get that.
And
But I would like to see, so you've got to, in the report itself, there's a recitation of what the regulations are, what's proposed and staff's comments. That's all relative to RM1. It doesn't say what R1 would be. So we know what RM1 says. We know what's being proposed in terms of modification, but we don't know where we're coming from in terms of what the current requirements would be. So you're right, single-family dwellings, how many parking spaces, what the lot frontages would be, et cetera. We don't have that information. Is that something that you can provide us with?
through you, Mayor Redekop, that will be in the recommendation report.
Yeah, because that would be very helpful for us in determining how much of a change is actually taking place. The do you know whether there will be any affordable units in this development?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, the proposal is for purpose-built rentals. And my understanding is that they will be obtainable. The word affordable has not been proposed, but more of obtainable because they are rental purpose-built.
So when the provincial policy statement talks about development in a settlement area, providing appropriate range and mix of housing options, densities to establish housing that is affordable to low and moderate income households, that's a factor that you'll be taking into account when you come up with your recommendation report.
Through you, Mayor Redekop, yes.
Okay. And got a couple of other questions, but I'll wait until we get to the report stage. Any other members of council? If not, thank you very much, Ms. Shugan. That takes us then to the proponent or the proponent's agent, in this case, Rochelle Larocque. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I believe I'd sent an, oh, there it is, a presentation. And I will be fairly quick because Robin did an excellent job and presented most of what I was going to be presenting. So my name is Rochelle Larocque. I am a registered professional planner in the province and a partner with the Erie Group. And tonight I'm representing my client, Royal Oak Holdings. So as Robin went through, the property is approximately 2,888 square meters or 0.71 acres. It's currently vacant. It's on the south side of Nye Road between Ridge and Gorham Road. The area is a mix of established residential developments and established residences, proposed subdivisions to the north, as well as the Royal Oak subdivision to the south. Should be noted as well that the subdivision to the south is a mix of singles, semis, and townhouses. And as identified, along the eastern portion of the property runs a servicing easement. The property is currently designated low-density residential, and it's within the Ridgeway Thunder Bay Secondary Plan. Currently, that designation allows for a maximum of 25 units per hectare, which permits singles, semi-detached duplex dwellings, but per the town's official plan, policy 4187D, it allows for increased development and increased density if a development meets one of four criteria, which has already gone through. It's our opinion that as Nye Road has been identified as a collector road, it is therefore able to take advantage of this policy and have an increased density, which is being proposed at approximately 35 units per hectare. So I won't go through each one of these in detail because they've already been gone through, but shortly we're proposing a reduction in frontage, reduction in the minimum lot size, a reduction in the landscaped area, and to permit 8 accessory dwelling units where 2 would typically be permitted by the Planning Act. And as has been identified, we have discussed the request for reduction of parking that we had requested of 1.25 spaces per unit. We are going to be formally advising staff that we're rescinding that amendment to the bylaw as we can provide that minimum parking ratio. And this is what the proposed site plan looks like. In response to the question that was asked earlier, the proposed private road will be 6 meters in width. The red area on that plan is the designated fire route. In terms of waste collection, that will be sorted out at site plan. We've designed it so that the turning radius will meet the region's garbage trucks. However, through a detailed site plan process, that will be determined, and if private waste collection is required, that's what we will have to do. As identified, this is a proposal for purpose-built rentals for 10 townhouse units in 2 blocks with a maximum of 8 accessory dwelling units to be proposed. And as with all developments of this type, site plan approval will be required. And this is the conceptual elevations at this time. And this is the list of studies that are required, were required as part of a complete application and have been submitted to the town, and are currently being reviewed by staff and all applicable agencies. And I look forward to any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaRocque. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any sidewalks in this?
Through the mayor to the councillor, at this time, there are no sidewalks proposed, as it is a private road. So it would be low traffic, it's not a through street, but that is something that we could look at further, should the application for zoning be approved.
Will there be parking allowed on the 6-meter road?
Through the mayor, as it's 6 meters and will be designated as a fire route, there will be no parking permitted on the road.
Okay. My next question is, I'm looking at the diagram that I'm having here that just was shown earlier. And dwelling unit 8, and right by the bike racks and behind the visitors, 1, 2, 4, there's that laneway, or there's a space there. What's that space for?
Through the mayor, that would just be green walkway space.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council? So, if you have 24 vehicles for the 18 total units, and they're all in their driveways or in the 4 spaces you've provided to the south end of the one row of houses, where do guests park? Where would additional vehicles park? They can't park in the fire lane. They're presumably not going to be parking out on Nye Road, or are they?
To the mayor, my understanding is that parking is not permitted on Nye Road, so they would not be permitted to park on the road as it exists now.
So where would they park?
To the mayor, that would be something that residents would have to sort out prior to having guests.
So if you were sitting where we're sitting, that might not be the best answer, because when we approve this, we don't want to have the residents who eventually buy these units figuring out where the heck they're going to park, because we decided that this is something that they can figure out. That's a concern that I have. I'll leave it at that.
And to respond to that, we are not going to be requesting a reduction to the parking ratio anymore, and therefore we've met the town's minimum standards.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. You are requesting a reduction in the landscaping requirement, I believe.
That is correct, Mayor. There is a minor reduction of 10%.
And why would that be? Why should we consider that?
To the mayor, in my opinion, there's still ample green space provided. All of the backyards have a minimum of 6 meters. on the side of on the south side have a minimum of 6 meters, and all of the towns facing, with the backyards facing east, have a minimum of 5 meters.
And how wide are these backyards?
To the mayor, I believe that it's, if I can read, 6 meters, and so it would be a 6 meter by 6 meter approximately.
20 by 20. 20 by 20. Any other questions, Councillor Noyes?
Thank you. It goes back to the parking issue. If it's a private road, who's going to enforce the parking?
Through the mayor, that would be enforced by the management company that manages the rental units.
Okay. I'm just concerned about the size of the road only being 20 meters, and people are going to park on it. We can say not to, but anyway, it'll be a problem that I see coming down the road. Thank you.
Councillor Christensen?
In terms of the distances to the downtown core, was that as the crow flies or as how people walk?
Through the mayor, I believe that was how people walk, but I will have to go back and review
I used
that.
Waze, and it was considerably longer than, according to Waze, both to the downtown core of Ridgeway and to the Gorham commercial space. So another question, Your Worship. You mentioned your phrasing was taking advantage of the collector road, which, as we've already determined, is quite narrow. To the east, it is a home to many 2-acre lots, and in the immediate vicinity to single-family homes, as you're aware. I guess, was there a consideration of the fact that this area is in fact not heavily urbanized, that there are, and when we say close proximity to parks, there may be in the future a neighborhood park, but right now it's a nature park, and it's a couple of kilometers to the nearest large park. Were those things taken into consideration, given that that type of rental accommodation is likely to be home to families?
Through the mayor to the councillor, in reviewing properties and reviewing their development potential and reviewing what's appropriate, it's looking at what the neighborhood is now, but also looking at the long-term vision that the town sets out in their policies, as well as the long-term vision that the province sets out. So there is a need for housing. There's a need for rental housing, and there's a long-term need. So yes, there are a number of single houses in the immediate neighborhood, but that doesn't mean in 10 years' time that neighborhood is going to look the same. So we need to plan long-term for tenure as well as density. And there needs to be more housing, there needs to be more rental housing. Yes, the community will grow. The town will put the upgrades onto Nye Road to widen it, to provide sidewalks. The lands to the north will get developed into a plan of subdivision. Trails will be constructed as per the secondary plan, and parks will be developed. Timing of development and timing of municipal upgrades don't always fall hand in glove. But that doesn't mean that we should have to wait to be providing rental units, to be providing housing for municipal infrastructure to be upgraded. There's servicing available in terms of sewer and water. There are stormwater infrastructure plans for this property, and there is a definite need for this type of housing. And the need is now, and to wait for this infrastructure to be completed would be not using the lands that we have available at this time as efficiently as we can.
I'm aware of all of that, but I would wonder why this particular place, and I used the term, I took your term, take advantage, because there are a number of other significant developments. So I would ask why a change to the zoning bylaw in this particular location when it is a significant difference and where it does introduce significant issues related to such things. And I respectfully disagree. I think the parking would become an issue with respect to this. So
Do you have a question?
the question is, why would what you have said, in view of the other developments that are going on within a very short radius, convince me to support the proposal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe any of the other projects that are proposed in this area are proposing rental housing. And this is providing a different form of housing to what's being proposed. Yes, it is in an area that has interest in residential development, but these all work together. That one subdivision is providing large single detached dwellings on larger lots. This is providing housing for a different type of user. And that's all part of creating a community and recognizing the residential housing needs of the entire community.
Anyone else? Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Will there be 10 individual owners or 10 properties or a single owner for this development?
Through the mayor, as this is going to be a rental property, it will be one owner managing all of the units.
If I may continue, Your
Yes,
Worship.
you may.
And can you give us an idea of how quickly you would be able to get shovels in the ground on this property?
Through the mayor, that I don't have information on. Once the zoning is in place, there is another process that will occur to make sure that we've done the detailed designs for servicing, the architectural design for the units. So there will be additional work that needs to go into this. So I don't have a timing of when shovels will be in the ground.
Councillor Flagg.
I would take a best guess.
Through the mayor,
We're going to bind you to this.
I would say just timing of how long it would take to get all of the additional works in place, seasonal work being done, 18 to 24 months.
That's reasonable. You are making a point to push us for rental homes. And if I'm going to make a decision, I appreciate the fact that you do that.
Anyone else? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. I just have actually two quick questions. I should say a comment and then a question.
No, you get to ask questions.
Okay, you caught me.
Yeah, I did.
So I'll be creative. I am concerned with the parking, and I know that's something that's been shared by council tonight. You mentioned to Councillor Flagg about the rough timeline in which construction could start on a project like this. If council were to go down the path of satisfaction being addressed with the parking and some of the other concerns we may have, what would the position of the client be with a sunset clause for the zoning on the property? And the reason I ask this is because there's properties that were zoned 20 years ago when I was first on council that still have seen no shovel in the ground, and we continue to be inundated by new applications that come forward. So any thoughts on a sunset clause on zoning?
Through the mayor, if, and it's at council's discretion to put a sunset clause in, if that was their wish, I would request that it be reasonable, given the, even though these are rental units, the economic outlook on the construction industry and on the development industry has not been the most positive in the past few months. So if a sunset clause is being put on, I would request a reasonable time frame of perhaps 5 years, simply given the economic outlook and given the difficulties everyone is facing.
Perfect, and thank you for your response and presentation. I like to think that we're reasonable, a bunch of people up here, but that's probably because I'm sitting up here.
Is that your comment?
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. One further question. Since these are going to be rental units, what's the ballpark for the monthly charge?
Through the mayor, that information I don't have at this time because of the timing of when construction is going to happen. This is the first phase in the project. And so until we get to the point of knowing what those hard construction costs are going to be, we haven't done that step yet. So we don't have all of those economic numbers and that pro forma completed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Councillor Noyes kind of hinted at my similar thought about the rental costs and where we're going. I'm just wondering, you know, not to kind of, you know, hold you to anything, but the municipality has recently put in place a community improvement program to encourage more affordable housing. And I'm just wondering, with these being purpose-built rental units, have you had any discussions with staff about possibly taking advantage of that program? Is this something that yourself or Mr. King have had any discussion over? I'm just trying to, just to try and get an idea.
Through the mayor, at this point, we haven't had any discussion with staff, and I don't believe my client has either, because as I said, this is the first step in the process. Should council approve this application, the next step is moving forward on these detailed designs and looking at, are there any programs available, any funding opportunities, any additional programs that we would and be able to apply for.
Yep.
So just to summarize, you're open to it, is what you're saying.
Through the mayor, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much then, Ms. LaRocque. Appreciate your comments. Okay, so is there anyone other than the proponent or the proponent's agent who wishes to speak in favor of the application for rezoning? Mr. Patton, anyone in the digital waiting room?
We had somebody email myself and Clerk earlier last week about today, and they replied to it, but I haven't seen them join yet.
Okay.
So I've been keeping an eye out for them, but I'm not sure which side they want to speak.
Okay, so I'll ask you again when we get to anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or who wishes to address council with respect to the matter. This is your opportunity now. Please put up your hand if you wish to address us. Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors.
You're welcome.
My name is Sam Rutherford. My wife Janet and I live at 3755 Nye Road. We've been living at this house for 33 years, but my family, we've been on this section of Nye Road for 60 years, so we kind of know and enjoy our low-density residential area we've come to love. Also, I can speak for my immediate neighbor, Mrs. Mary Nolte at 3747 Nye Road. Her property, my property, and my brother Michael's property at 3773, we all abut this property in this L shape. So the western boundary and the southern boundaries are ours. We're opposed to this zoning amendment application, as are most of the residents, I think, that have sent in their letters and their comments on this proposal. The main thing is the density that we talked about. And the question we have from the beginning is like, there was a pre-consultation done, I guess a year or two ago, and the original application was for 18 units, and that was considered to be, it was 18 units and 27 parking spaces, considered to be in conflict with the existing densities envisioned through the secondary plan. And so that was sent back for revision. And now we're faced with this revised plan, which, lo and behold, is 18 units again. So, there's discrepancy between all the paperwork here. Some of the reports state 10 units, and some of them state 18. So we're a little confused about that, and maybe that's a question that could be answered at some point before the recommendation report. It just doesn't seem to make sense that we're still on 18 units, and it was something that was rejected originally. And we're not really too sure about these accessory dwelling units, what they contain, or how many people will actually be living on this site. These lots, like most of the houses that are on this stretch, their lots are as big or bigger than this lot, with single-family homes on them, and you're proposing to go into this lot and put in, 2 blocks of 5 townhouses each. It just doesn't make total no sense at all to us living in this area. The other big problem that we have a concern is with the drainage. So with the proposed construction and development here, the stormwater runoff will be increased 250% across this property. And it's already, an issue with a lot of people in our area on the drainage. So that's certainly one of our big concerns, especially with the back of our neighbor's property at times, and also the back of our property at times as well too. And with this proposal, they're going to have snow storage along, which would basically be along our fence lines. So where's all that going to go when that melts? So that's also a concern that we have. I was glad everybody brought up the parking. That's also a big issue that we have. The parking and also the emergency vehicle access. So think about this, it's actually, and then it goes back again to 18 units, because if you take 23 spaces divided by 18, you get the 1.27 that they're looking for, the 1.25. So that means visitors are going to be parking somewhere, right? Either on that private road, or they're going to be parking on Nye Road in front of our houses, which is going to be, quite dangerous actually. And if people do park on the private road, I just wonder in any emergency, like where are the, fire trucks or, EMS vehicles, how are they going to get in there? It's a 6-meter road. And I'm not really sure even if the turning radius with this T-turn in there is enough to support that or not. But I believe that will be looked at some point in the future as well too. The other concern we have is with the trees, the tree bylaw, which you've got a meeting coming up on that as well too. So, again, they're going to propose to cut down, 20 trees on this lot. And, and they're all like mature trees that are along the property lines. And there's nowhere to replace these on there. So I think with the bylaw itself, if you have to replace in like, and there'd be no room on this lot to do that. The other thing is with the sewage easement that they have there, you can't plant trees on that. It's specific for that. So that even restricts you even more to how you can replace any trees on that. So it's like, it's just like we're taking 20 trees out and adding 23 cars. So it just seems to fly in the face of, any climate mitigation strategies that the town may have, right? So also when I think of like, all those cars, like right beside us there, on a cold winter's day, starting up, it makes no sense to me at all. The other thing is there's the privacy. So we've got these 2-story blocks, one's facing west towards Mary Nolte, our neighbor's house, and the ones that are on the southern boundary, they'll be facing north, so they'll be facing into her backyard and into our backyard at 2 stories high. So we just, a little concerned about how we're going to be encroached upon there in this area. So, we have a lot of concerns, and that's why, we are opposed to this change, and hope that you will at least, listen to our cries and maybe send this back for some modification. The town recommendation report, there's a couple of discrepancies in there that maybe Robin can fix up before the next report.
Yeah, that's an information report at this stage.
Is it? Okay.
The recommendation report is the
Do you-
final report.
Do you want me to just to point out, though, there's only a couple little
Please.
errors there? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so just, the Royal Ridge, and I think Rochelle said that as well, too. Royal Ridge is towns and semis. It's not single detached homes, right? That's all it is back there, so. And that's one thing that needs to be fixed in there. The other thing is the distance, and I think Ms. Christensen pointed that out. It says that it's 800 meters to downtown. It's not. It's 1,800. It's actually 2 kilometers to get to the post office area. So, of course, that's walkable, but it's a lot further than what's stated here. The distance to Beaver Creek Park, that's accurate. But it's a small, small kids park, and it's a perfect park, for that little subdivision that it's attached to, but nobody's walking down Nye Road and across Gorham, down the gravel shoulder to get to that little park. And there's lots of families on our street now with young kids, and you never see them out walking down our stretch because it's just that, it's hazardous, right, without the sidewalks in place. The other point I just wanted to make in Appendix 3 in the town recommendation report, I think Brad Johnson had talked about a possible hold on this ZBA because it wasn't clear whether it was 10 units or 18 units that were being looked at here either. So I guess that's probably all I have to say. All right.
That's a fair bit, Mr.
Is it?
Okay.
Okay.
No, we appreciate that because you've
Okay.
provided a number of areas of concern. Any members of council have any questions of Mr. Rutherford? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Mayor Redekop to Mr. Rutherford. Mr. Rutherford, you talked about the 20 trees. How many
Yeah.
of these 20 trees are along the property line?
Along Mary's property line there by her fence, there's at least 8 or 10.
And a further question, do any of these trees share the property? Well, like, in other words, there's a little bit on my side, a little bit on your side.
I think there are a few in the tree report that do, and I think they're on my brother's property.
Okay.
So, and,
Okay, thank you.
yeah,
Anyone else?
we,
Councillor Christensen.
Just
Yeah.
for clarification,
Sure.
then, you said your family's been there for 60 years.
yeah.
Okay, I just, yes, I find it, it's one of the issues that I think we need to consider when we're looking at the
Yeah.
broad scope of planning.
Yeah.
Because there is the future and there's the now. And you talked again about you confirmed that the kids don't go to the closest local park because of the lack of urbanization and the distance.
Yeah, the closest actual park would be at the Ridgeway Arena, and that's like 3.5 to 4 kilometers to walk down that way. And there's no public open space or trails or parks within, a reasonable walking distance from this location.
And wouldn't it then be legitimate to say at what point do you develop hoping for 20 years from now?
Yeah.
Versus the
Okay, so you're
hazards
getting into
Is that-
comments.
The comments.
You're getting into comments.
was a question.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was a question, and we know
Yes.
your answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I did send my written comments in. I hope you got them. Ashley had said, I guess it was too late for that report, but you'll have them, so.
Yeah.
And my brother Michael also sent in quite a detailed report, and he shares the same concerns that we do with the rest of our neighbors.
Right. Anyone else before I let Mr. Rutherford sit down? Thank you very much, Mr. Rutherford.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to address council? Yes, please come forward, sir. Good evening, Pastor.
Good evening. William Thomas. I live in Stevensville, so I don't have the same concerns as residents on Nye Road, but and my comments are really brief.
We do need your address.
Pardon me?
We do need your address.
Oh, you do? 4065 Village Creek Drive
Thank you.
in Stevensville. So 2 things. I just want to comment on, I think it's really important. Councillor Lewis brought up the idea of a sunset clause. I would like to encourage council, as this development and others come forward, that a sunset clause do be kind of considered and hopefully implemented, because there are a number of spaces that are still awaiting development. And the second thing is anytime something like this comes up, the question was asked, it was not really responded to. I would like to encourage council to, I know you can't mandate such things, but to encourage developers to always be considering affordable housing when they're considering developments. I agree with the presentation that, that rental units are needed. They are. I mean, Fort Erie does need them. Whether this is a development or not, I'm not going to speak to that. We do need rental units, but what we also need is rental units that are affordable to families who are low income or precarious income. So I would like to encourage council to always keep that on the table and to always keep that in front of developers as they consider these kinds of developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you go, any members of council have any questions? Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you, thank you very much for coming this evening. It's always great to see you here, and I always like when you come up and you mention that. I'm sure you're aware of this, but I'm going to ask anyway. You are aware that we do have the affordable housing CIP, and that we're starting to put some, at least starting to move in that direction to offer some incentives and along those lines, right?
I do. I sit on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, so I'm aware of the CIP and the movement forward. I still want to make sure that this stays in front of us because the CIP does suggest certain things, but it doesn't do this.
And I want to thank you coming up. Not to use a pun here or anything, but you're preaching to the choir. So thank you very much.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to address council? Yes, please come forward, sir. And
Ken
give your name.
McGregor, I'm at 3843 Nye Road,
I'm sorry,
which
your
is
first name?
Ken or Kenneth, yeah.
McGregor?
McGregor, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't have much more to say other than the gentleman here. I agree with everything he says. I'm against this project. We live across the street from two houses that were approved in the past that are sitting empty and have been empty for the past year now and haven't been sold. I think that a lot of this stuff could be taken care of on that new subdivision that's been proposed at the northern part and leave this property to continue the same way that the rest of the properties are in that neighborhood. That's what I'll have to say. The gentleman basically covered everything that I agree with, but I just wanted to add those further comments on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor. Any member of council have any questions of Mr. McGregor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wish to address council? Yes, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm a little nervous, really nervous.
Me too. We need your name and address to start off.
My name's Judy Eggleton. I live at 2916 Cherry Avenue, Ridgeway. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Helen, my dad, Mort, my brother, Wayne, and myself, Judy. We're all Eggletons still. I moved here 65 years ago. And you know what? My home was on this property that is proposed to you tonight. My mom and dad worked really, really hard to buy a lot that was 4 lots east of this proposed property. And they bought the lot, built a house, and I had to sell it 2 years ago because my mother had to go into long-term care. And my dad passed away 30 years ago. So Nye Road has become a homestead almost for me in losing the home that my mother loved and my dad. My brother also lived on Nye Road, which is 1 lot to the east of the proposed new subdivision. We had to sell his house in '22 because he passed away. We are not against building, but as Sammy said, I don't feel that this building complies with the area of Nye Road. My parents and I guess it's more so my mom, owns the lot that is east of this property. It is vacant, and she owns it. And when she passes away, it will come down to me as an inheritance that my parents worked very, very hard to purchase and to hand down to us. They also purchased the property, it was all one at one time, to the east of my property, which was where my brother lived. The only thing that my mom, that still owns the property, is very concerned about is that now I will have, or when I take over the property, I will have 5 backyards up against the west side of my property. Also, I will have the unit that is on the back side of the house, which will face north and south. That will be the side property, and that will back up to my property also. I feel that my property has depreciated. If this subdivision goes in, this has depreciated my property or my mother's to a very bad extent, because that value is not there as it is right now when I have 5 backyards going up against the east side or the west side of my property. So that's the only real comment that I have, but that's all. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Ms. Eggleton. Any questions by members of council? No, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
comments. Anyone else who wishes to address council, please come forward, ma'am. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Wendy Hare. I live at 3725 Nye Road, the property next to Judy's. I just wanted to know if there was any studies done on the rental market for Fort Erie, if there's any need for rentals at this time, because right now, if you're going all-purpose rentals, there's no caps on any new builds after November 2018, so there could be any rent increases imposed. So I can't see that being a help to bringing in, needed rentals for people that are looking for affordable housing. I can't see how that would help. What happens is people get in there, and then after 12 months, they get a huge increase, and they can't afford to move, so they end up with a rental that's unaffordable to the point of eviction, and I don't want to see that happen. I agree with everything everybody else has said. I'm concerned about all the trees that are going to be taken out. The walking distance, as they were described, it's much further, and I would never be able to walk downtown. I can't see a mother pushing a stroller all the way downtown. Can't see that happen. The easements, I have concerns. That's going to be under their backyards. If there's any issues with sewage or anything, it could potentially leak into the basements of all these people that are on the east side. If it's a private waste collection, is this going to be dumpsters? Are there going to be rats, coming to the area because of the dumpsters holding all the garbage for 10 units? I find that very, concerning, and I wanted to know, is the city funding any of this stuff? Is this property or being funded?
I'll answer that question first, no. And your other question about housing, we have done housing studies in the past. There is a need for rental units in Fort Erie. There's a distinction between rental units and affordable rental units.
Mm-hmm.
So we've adopted a program, as Councillor Dubanow has made reference to an affordable housing community improvement program. And that's a whole different ball of wax. but there is a need for rental units.
Where would we be able to find this study?
It'll be online. It's something that
I tried to find it.
to provide.
Okay. I tried to find it, I couldn't find anything. Okay. So right now, is this affordable housing right now? Is that what it's considered? Or is this just
So the answer
rentals?
that was provided by the agent for the owner is that that hasn't been determined, but I
Okay.
don't believe it's.
So right now, there are no rent caps, it's unlimited rent increases after these people
We
move in?
don't have control of that. That's a provincial matter.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say.
Well-
There is no control on that. So I wouldn't consider it affordable housing at this time.
It's not being it's not being presented to us as necessarily affordable.
Exactly.
Right now, we're at the zoning stage, and the zoning stage is to permit rental housing unit to be constructed.
Something just to keep in mind, that's all I'm
Yep.
saying. Okay?
Sure. Any questions of Ms. Harris? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address council? Please come forward, sir.
Hi, my name's Blaine Wright. I live at 3706 Nye Road. We moved to Ridgeway because of the feel of Ridgeway. If I wanted to live in Toronto, I would have moved to Toronto. If I wanted to live in downtown Ridgeway, I would have moved there. I would have moved to Fort Erie. You know, it's nice and quiet area. If you hear any noise, it's probably from my house. It's a couple things. I've got 3 boys. It's rather my kids or it's me yelling at my kids to stay away from the road because how fast people drive down the road and how dangerous it is. I won't harp on the parking, but if you approve this and you think people aren't going to park in a fire lane or they're not going to park on Nye, then I think the town should be liable for approving this because that's going to happen. With it being a private emergency lane, no one's looking at it. Police officers, you know, you already said yourself you're not funding the patrol of it, so you're not looking for it. So it's not going to be looked at. So the road is busy. I tell my kids to stay away from the road. You know, often if they want to ride their bikes, we actually go to the development that you guys approved that's behind us because it's quite empty. Don't have to worry about my kids riding their bikes back there, even though there's all these houses. Is that associated with the developer on this end? Yeah, did Brent King develop those? And this is a true question. Was once upon a time, the property we're talking about, was there trying to be an entryway from this property to that area?
So that's a little beyond the scope of this public hearing. We're dealing with this particular
Sure.
development.
No, my question was concerning that if that was the case and you got left with an irregular shaped property, maybe the developer wants to make a little more money on the back end by shoving 20 houses into an irregular shaped property. So I work for a developer in Buffalo. I would be baffled if we let 20 homes next to all these other homes that are single dwelling that have over half acre, an acre, acre and a half, 2 acres, whatever they are. If it's this easy to develop here in Fort Erie and shove apartments wherever, then I'll probably start working to build here. That's a comment. On the town notes on chapter 9.2 for the last meeting, it said developers shall not negatively impact neighboring properties. My house as well as my neighbor's house gets flooding about twice a year, severely. Severely enough to where I have emails and complaints and texts and calls, and I've actually come several times and brought it forward and it's never been addressed. I've had meetings with the mayor twice that have been canceled by your receptionist and then told me that, you know, that they would talk to me up there and it's always a phone call and nobody ever gets back to me.
Sorry, what's your last name?
Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. So I've been pulled up twice up to the room up there to talk to the drainage department as well as planning.
I'll check with my
we've
assistant
been-
because I don't recall the name, but that's
Sure.
fine.
But and when I mean flooding, I mean both our homes have higher insurance because they've been known to flooding because of this area. So the way the water drainage works down Nye is there is a ditch on the opposite side of the road. And that ditch just goes down and collects all the water from all the houses. But then that ditch magically stops right where this neighborhood that you guys are talking about building to the north. It's been my understanding that the town is hoping that the developer of that neighborhood would maybe also help to redo the road. That's what I've heard, because it stops there. There is no underground.
So, Ray, we got to stick you to the matter that's before us, which is 3741 Niagara
Sure,
Road.
sure, yeah, I would be baffled if we didn't fix the current drainage problem, but we're about to add 10 more townhomes to the already existing problem area. I think Joanne hit it on the head. She didn't quite say you're putting the cart before the horse, but if you're telling me you're gonna put apartments here and that you guys will figure out it later, that sounds backwards to me. If you're telling me my kids that are 6 or 7, they're gonna be in college by the time it gets addressed, that doesn't sound right to me. I thought the idea of the already developed areas, they talked about the 2 homes that are very modern, that have sat there for over a year empty, the neighborhood in the back, what's happening, I'm all for development. I think you should put a house there. I think it should be a house with a half acre, just like matches the rest of them. I don't think you should shrink the frontage. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't fit the area, and already developments that have already happened, it shows that. The proof's in the pudding. You can see flat that it's not working, and it's already upsetting everybody as is. We talked about, the first 2 minutes of this meeting was talking about being respectful to the indigenous land. I'm not quite sure shoving 20 apartments into a half acre parcel next to a bunch of other single dwelling units with half acres or more. I don't think that's the best use of the space for that area. I wasn't a big fan of the photos showing north, east, south, and west at the opening there. I thought it may have even been strategic. It didn't actually show what you're talking about building and what it's going to do to the actual houses, even the site plan. Like, it doesn't show all the parking area. It doesn't show that these houses are like in these people's backyards where they drive. It seemed a little deceptive to me. I had a question. Where is the nearest multi-dwelling unit of this magnitude closest to this one that we're proposed? It's probably because there's not one for quite a while. Like, it's really weird that we're putting in possibly 20 rental spaces here. I don't know where the nearest apartment building is, or rentals. It just doesn't matter. If you told me you were building this downtown Ridgeway where my kids could get and walk and go get an ice cream cone, it makes sense.
Mr. Wright, I got to bring you back. We're talking about this property. We're not talking about what might be.
No, I'm asking from this property. It seems weird that you're putting 20 houses when everything around it is single dwelling. You're putting 20 houses here. I'm wondering, where's the nearest one? Like, it's got to make sense of some sort. Like, you're putting an urbanized, building right in the middle of where there's no it's not urbanized. Everything's single dwelling. There's no sidewalks. People are afraid of the road. It doesn't make sense to me. I would want to know who thought that this was, like, it made sense.
Okay, so just so that you're aware of the process. We don't own the land.
Sure.
Somebody owns the land.
Okay.
Anybody that owns land can make application for a development approval, such as a rezoning.
Right.
That's what the developer, the owner of this property has done.
Okay.
Under the law of Ontario, this council has an obligation to consider the application, and our staff has an obligation to process it. You recall one of the slides that was part of Ms. Shogun's presentation showed a timeline. So the date the application is deemed to be complete through to the time when this council has to make a decision as to whether to approve or deny it.
Okay.
That's all part of the provincial legislation that says we have to process these things.
Okay.
So whether it's a good idea or it's a bad idea, at this stage of the game, this is a process whereby staff provides an information report to council as part of a public meeting, which this is, so that councillors become informed of what is being proposed, and the public has an opportunity to provide their comments as to what is being proposed. The next step is staff takes into account everything that's been said here, the questions that have been asked by council, and the comments that are going to be made, if there are any, during the time when we consider the report that is part of this public meeting or follows this public meeting, and then we receive from staff a recommendation report. And then we have to make a decision as to whether to approve, modify, or deny the application. That's how the process goes.
Okay. Well, I guess you can tell I'm unhappy. So, I guess my next question would be, again, you guys were talking about the driveways. It somebody asked how many cars can fit in the existing driveways. I can fit 10 cars in my driveway. So that's the kind of atmosphere, that's the kind of what the surrounding area looks like. A lot of times we have these meetings and people don't even drive by the area, but we want to sit here and comment on it. I would encourage you after the meeting to drive by and look at the neighborhood and see what it looks like and see what 20 units would look like. Is there any plans, back to the flooding, is there any plans to address current issues? I just didn't like how on the report it said that the development does not pose any issue on the neighboring. I'd like to I put it in the email, and I'd like to, have it here that there are current flooding issues and that we're just adding to that. That's my main concern here.
Yeah, staff is taking notes, so they'll be responding to the issues that have been raised.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Any members of council have any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address council? Mr. Patton, is there anyone in the digital waiting room?
Your worship, the person who
Never arrived?
never joined. I kept checking my email just to make sure.
Oh, okay.
Any fires.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, was there any late correspondence that hasn't been the subject of a delegation to council?
Mayor Redekop, I have received comments from Sam and Janet Rutherford, who spoke tonight, and Helen Eggleton, but I see that her comment was included in the report.
Okay, and was there also something from Michael Rutherford?
I believe that was also in the report, in the public comments.
Yeah, okay. Okay, if there's nothing further, I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And we're going to move then to report PBBS 17-2025. Councillor Lewis, that report is on the floor for questions or comments by staff, by members of council. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just regard to everything we've heard, certainly I think staff will take that information and do, when we have a recommendation report that comes forward, I'm sure it'll, either address or find ways to mitigate those concerns. But I want to touch on what Pastor Thomas had mentioned earlier with regard to the affordable housing aspect. It's not very often, regardless of the type of unit, whether it's an actual apartment, which are multi-floor buildings, or a townhouse development, it's not very often where we see purpose-built rentals. And when I see a proposal come forward that are purpose-built rentals, I see that as an opportunity for, affordable housing, whether it is the entire development, whether it is a portion of the development so that they can make the numbers and find a use. I see a lot of opportunity there. So we'll see where the recommendation report comes forward, but my only comment here right now is that this is an opportunity. I think it's fair to say that we can't force developers to provide affordable housing. They own the property, they market the property, they're taking on the risk, and they're figuring out how much they want to sell it for. But when an opportunity like this comes forward for purpose-built rentals, I think it's incumbent upon us to find a way to meet that affordability target that we're looking for. And, there's CMHC, we have our own affordable housing CIP here right now. That is something I would be really keen to see when this proposal comes forward as a recommendation report, to see if we've had a discussion or maybe we can work out the numbers once some of the construction costs are finalized. Because, some of us right now are lucky enough to have homes. Some of us are lucky enough to have them on big properties. Some of us are lucky enough to have them on small postage stamp properties. But there's a lot of people right now who can't afford basic housing, regardless of where it is in this province. It is not just a big city issue, it is a small town and a village issue. And I'm really hoping that when everything is ironed out and we know where the cost's going, that we can take advantage of this opportunity if they're purpose-built rentals. So that's my only comment, and we'll see what the recommendation report brings forward. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Anyone else? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I would love to see affordable units here, but I'm not anticipating may not actually happen. I am concerned about the parking. I think we've all kind of voiced that. With 10 units and 8 accessory, you're looking at 18 housing, like families that are living there. And my concern is that it's going to be a problem. And if the town's not going to enforce it, it would be interesting to see if the manager actually does enforce it. And I don't know if we have any mechanism to make them enforce it if the staff do look at it and find out that the fire route is being blocked. I would imagine then we do have some enforcement ability if they're blocking the fire route. I'm making an assumption here. The other thing that this, in the report someplace, it talks about some of these units are 3-bedroom units, if I'm not mistaken, which when I'm looking at something that's 3-bedroom units, I'm looking at children. And again, there are no sidewalks. The buses are going to go down that private road. So I imagine they're going to be waiting at the end of the private road and Nye Road for pickup and delivery. And from I heard from Mr. Wright that this is and other people that this is there's also a bend in the road not too far from there. And I am concerned that there's no place for pickup and drop off for the kids. And I think that needs to be considered. Just so that they have a place to wait, because if the road itself is only 6 meters, the parents and the kids that are waiting for the bus for pickup and delivery are going to have a problem. If I'm not mistaken, there's ditches on both sides of Nye Road too, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so I have those concerns. The other thing is the infrastructure. In one of the comments, it said the staff report that they're not too concerned about infrastructure, but another part of the report says we're not sure what the Niagara Region is going to do because we need to have upgrades. So I'm not sure which one is true. It's kind of like the first one, and they're not guaranteeing that the sewer capacity. They're not guaranteeing any of the development in this area a specific number of sewer capacity. So you don't know until it comes time to bid. And I guess the first one who starts to build will have a better chance of getting the regional ability to hook into the sewers than some of the others. So I'm not quite sure. Would like some clarification on the infrastructure in regards to sewers and pumping stations. Wonder if somebody can give me some background on that.
Which one of you gentlemen would like to chime in, Mr. Frost or Mr. Yamarino?
Mr. Frost.
Through you, Your Worship. At this point in time, at the early stages, we haven't gone in full depth looking at a full servicing report for the area. That comes at a later stage in the planning process to understand the sewer capacities. We do, with that said, have the Nye 20 capital project, which is a development charge project to upgrade the road that currently is undergoing design as we speak, which will move forward to construction in the future. I can't speak to when, but I can get them to update for council on that.
Thank you for that, and actually that's in the report too, and that there's kind of a caveat there saying we're not sure when it's going to happen, but there may be budget restraints. So the future is open to when that's actually going to happen. But when we're talking about 10 units and 8 accessories, we're talking about a certain amount of wastewater. If there were fewer units, I would assume that would be beneficial if there's a capacity problem, that there'd be fewer units, there'd be less strain on the sewer system. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Frost, can you comment on that, keeping in mind the context of development in the whole area?
Through you, Your Worship. It's not necessarily the number of units, but the number of fixtures in each unit itself that dictate the amount of sanitary requirements or strain on the system. So if you have 20 units or 10 units with the same number of fixtures, therefore your water consumption would be the same and you would expect a very similar output to the sanitary sewer. So at this point, we can't really comment on the numbers until we see the functional servicing that dictates truly what the sewer discharge would be for the development.
Okay, thank you. And then the next thing is going to be about the trees. Are there any trees on the property lines here?
Ms. Shogan, do you know that? Or is that something you're going to need to get back to us on?
Staff, there are trees that will need permission to be cut down, and, sorry, I can look into whether those are trees that are along the perimeter. But
So on the
they're,
perimeter, though, the adjacent property owner would have to be in agreement, I presume.
through you, Mayor, to your Redekop, yes, that's why they would require permission to be cut.
Councillor Noyes?
Okay, so that's basically where I was going with this. I think that anyone on the property line, you're going to need permission from the abutting neighbors, and they may not receive it. Thank you.
Councillor Christensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I appreciate the need for affordable housing and certainly appreciate the concept of purpose-built rentals. I also believe that, and I do believe and support the concept of infill, but I'd like to sort of temper that with the fact that our current bylaw designates them as R1. So we are asking, there's a request for this multiple residential with a significant reduction in a number of areas. And that gives me concern. I'm not opposed to infill. I am opposed to over-intensification, depending on the area, and given a lot of the other considerations that we've spoken about tonight. They will be family homes, not necessarily the ADUs, but the townhomes. So there will likely be children. There will likely be multiple vehicles in many of those family homes, because even the rentals that will be market, assuming that one or two or three of whatever number are deemed affordable, or we can negotiate that, the rest of them are probably going to be significantly high. So that means two-income homes. So where I have significant reservations about the scale at this point. So I'm hoping that staff, and I'm asking staff to take a look at the overall situation. Ridgeway in particular has a dearth of parks and park space. It is a significant distance from, and I do drive this, so I know exactly where it is, what your properties are, the road, the speed of cars. I understand all of that, so be absolutely aware of that. But I really think I have a lot of concerns about what has been presented, and it's the scale more than anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I like this part in the meeting because I can make statements and not questions. But just want to go over a couple of things that came up tonight, and I hope that staff get back to us with the comment about discrepancies with the units and what was originally proposed and what was rejected. The other thing that I heard tonight was the trees that would be cut down. Is there enough room on the property to replant the trees that have been removed? The other concern about waste collection, because I don't understand from the current drawing where or how that would happen, and I appreciate maybe it's not at this stage that we would, but I am curious on that. And then lastly, the site plan. When I pull up the report, the site plan and elevations in Appendix 2 shows very nicely the subject property with the adjacent homes around it. I think it would be helpful for council when we get back to a recommendation stage to see the actual site plan as it relates to the homes that are in the property, because it is very different to me, at least when I look at it on one map. It doesn't look quite as much on one piece of property, but then when you look at the map with the neighboring houses, I kind of have a difference of opinion on that. And then lastly, I just want to confirm, if it's 6-meter backyards, and I'm going to assume at some point someone's going to either build a 10-by-10 patio slab patio, or a deck will go up, or a shed will go up, the minimum of a 10-by-10 patio would be approximately 3 meters in diameter. So on a family dwelling, that would leave a backyard of 3 meters for a family. And I just hope that when staff look at this, and I can appreciate we're in times right now where not everyone can afford to necessarily have the size lot we would like, but when we start thinking about how big the backyards where a family could be ends up being around 3 meters, I don't even know if, I'm just going to leave my comments there on that one, but I hope that staff do take those comments into consideration, because those were some of the main things I heard from some of the residents tonight, and it would be nice to see those addressed or at least acknowledged in the staff report. I am going to support the recommendation, the report to move forward for information purposes only, mainly because I think it's not a good practice to vote against not receiving more information. So I hope people understand that, but certainly while I can appreciate where the developer is coming from in terms of trying to meet the need for purpose-built rentals, I do think some of the concerns from the neighborhood are most warranted. So those are just my only comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Anyone else? Mr. Yamarino, I wonder if you could just explain how we get 10 apartment units and then what are called additional dwelling units. How is that authorized and where does that come from?
To you, Mayor, if I understand the question correctly, I think you're speaking to the provincial authority with respect to 2 ADUs being permitted on each lot. So the province, with recent amendments to the Planning Act, has permitted on each property a minimum of 3 dwelling units. So the main dwelling, as well as 2 additional units. Both units can either be inside the main dwelling or attached to the main dwelling, or a maximum of 1 detached accessory dwelling unit, and then a limit of 1 within or attached to the main dwelling.
So this proposal, which requests a change in zoning to allow 10 apartment units to be constructed, would then qualify for an additional 10, except there isn't enough parking for 10, so hence only 8 additional dwelling units.
That's correct.
Okay. But that's a decision that this council will determine in connection with whether we alter the zoning or not.
That's correct.
But if there is no change in the zoning and somebody put up a house here, they could put up a couple of additional dwelling units, provided they've got the parking.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Or anybody that lives in any of the houses currently on Nye Road could put in additional dwelling units if they chose to, as a matter of right.
That's correct, as long as they meet all the applicable zoning provisions. Yes.
And that's pursuant to provincial legislation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, Councillor Noyes?
Someone brought it up, one of the presenters brought it up, in regard to this particular property. Was this property ever considered as an access route to the larger development?
Mr. Yamarino, do you know that?
Through the mayor to Councillor Noyes, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly investigate that and we can provide that in the recommendation report if you'd like.
And I would appreciate that. And if it was, and obviously if this proposal goes through, it will no longer be, how that affects the site plans or the plans of subdivision we've already approved. Thank you.
So, Councillor Noyes, I would just say that looking at the location map, it doesn't look like this lot would provide access because it just touches a point of the Royal Ridge development. Might have been the parcel next door. Just looking at it. Any other comments? If not, I'll call the question to receive this report for information purposes. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, so that takes us to the consent agenda. So we've dealt with this report. The next stage, for those of you who are here, is that staff will filter through all of the comments that have been made, the comments and questions raised by the public and by council, and then we'll prepare the recommendation report, and that will be coming sometime within the next 2 months, because this has to be dealt with, according to the province, by May. Okay? And if any of you wish to leave at this point, you may do so. We're going to start going through the rest of the agenda. You're welcome to stay, though, if you wish. Okay. All right, that takes us to the consent agenda. Councillor Dubanow, you're moving it. Are there any questions or comments with respect to any of the reports contained in the consent agenda? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. The report 8.1.6, the year-end report for the Fort Erie Fire Department, including emergency management. I just wanted to comment, and in that there's a lot of attention, which rightly so, I think we fully support, about the carcinogenic nature of when you fight fires and what you may be bringing home. We're not letting them bring it home anymore. But I know that I mentioned it before in regards to the firemen's exposure in the cab, like in the fire truck itself on the way home, like on the way from the fire truck back to the station. And I'm wondering if there's been any thought in regards to, I know there's been thought that this is a situation that should be addressed, but I just wonder if there's been any progress on that. Thank you.
Chief.
Through your worship to the councillor, yes, there has. We've implemented a number of things. One being a decontamination policy in which we do have our staff decon on the scene using water and soaps, but also hand wipes to wipe around their necks and all the exposure points where the gear overlaps. In addition to that, we have the ability to remove the contaminated gear, bag it, and put them in basically disposable coveralls, so that they can ride back in the vehicle in uniforms that are not contaminated.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Councillor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship, on 8.11, I see we're putting a bunch of money here back into the EJ Freeland Community Center, and I'm not complaining about that, but I am interested in if we could get a memo somewhere down the line as to how much money we are putting into this this property of ours. Since the Boys and Girls Club have taken over, that would be of interest to me.
Yep, I'm sure that can be forthcoming. CEO, you'll follow up with that. We knew that there were going to be repairs and upgrades required when we acquired it for $1. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I do want to congratulate the chief with respect to the very detailed report that we received, and congratulations on another successful year. And I see that you've had some good success again in recruiting for new firefighters, which in response to the Solicitor General, who wants to know why we don't have a paid fire department. Why would we when we've got volunteers who are just as qualified and who want to serve their community? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations in the consent agenda, none opposed, that is carried. That takes us to Planning, Building, and Bylaw Services. Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Planning, Building, and Bylaw Services Subcommittee is now in session. We have a presentation this evening by Evan Sugden. Could you please come forward? Mr. Sugden is an associate with the Heritage Lead with the Erie Group, and this is with respect to the Cherry Hill Club at 912 Cherry Hill Boulevard North.
I won't be too long. It's been a long agenda tonight, so this is very quick. And in fact, this has been a very collaborative process between ourselves and my client, represented by Caroline Mullen. She's the general manager of the Cherry Hill Club. Through your worship and through Councillor Christensen, my name is Evan Sugden. I'm a heritage planner and a senior associate with the Erie Group. We've prepared a very small slide deck for you, but essentially we are the heritage planners for the Cherry Hill Club Golf Club. And what we've been doing is working alongside the Cherry Hill Club and town staff to navigate what is going to be, would have been quite a complicated heritage designation process. So what I wanted to do is specifically outline a couple of important things. So the subject site, most town staff are going to recognize this through its assessment parcel, which is what I've shown in here in red. It's also subject to a couple of other legal pins, so the actual legal parcel fabric. You can see in blue, this is a different assessment parcel, but the subject site is represented by what you see in red. However, heritage designations and protections apply to real property, and so what it would actually be applied to this site is specific to pin in red here. So you can see that there's actually 5 properties sort of surrounding and encompassing the Cherry Hill Club golf course. But pin in red here is the one that's the focus for attention. And specifically, what we're talking about in this case is the Cherry Hill Club clubhouse. So our job was to peer review and review essentially the town's consultant's heritage report. So ARA prepared quite a good report. ARA is an excellent firm, and what we've done is review it. And the Cherry Hill Club and ourselves have agreed that there is heritage value or interest in this building. It's tied specifically, though, to the clubhouse building itself. So that's the building you see on the screen there. This is an important aspect, especially for golf courses, because golf courses need to operate in perpetuity with flexibility in mind. They need to be able to change tee decks, move pins, add or remove waste bunkers, do tree maintenance, anything that a golf course requires to remain viable to its members. This is especially important for the Cherry Hill Club because this is a private members club. They demand excellence year over year, and it's a requirement for the Cherry Hill Club to maintain its business operation viably by having a flexible environment to change that course. And so any designation that's applies to that real property we mentioned. And so our goal here was to make sure that what's protected is focused on the clubhouse and specifically what you see from the street, because that's really the important piece, what the public sees, what people interact with on the daily basis. So everything you see in the photo here, the Cherry Hill Club has agreed is important for long-term protection. What they didn't want was that the clubhouse be designated so that way every time they change that bunker, change that tee deck, they have to go back to Heritage Committee for approval. That was unacceptable for them as a business, and it would make them non-viable and quite frankly, concerning to the private members that they couldn't make changes without that undue burden. So this is a map of the suggested heritage attributes that the town's heritage consultant has put forward. Essentially, what you see on the top there in yellow and pink. And then they've sort of delineated an area around the clubhouse in green. So what they've suggested in their report is that the clubhouse is the focus, and we are not disagreeing with that, with the ARA report. But what we've done is work with staff. And so through discussions with the town, the Cherry Hill Club has agreed to quite a novel approach. It's a more rare tool under the Heritage Act. It's called a Heritage Conservation Easement Agreement. In this case, what we're doing is applying a temporary Heritage Conservation Easement Agreement. What this would do is it provides long-term protection in perpetuity. It acts the same way as a Part 4 designation bylaw would. However, it allows us to focus the protection to the clubhouse through a legal description. And we're applying a legal description around that clubhouse via a reference plan, which creates a part. So you have a small rectangle around the clubhouse, and that rectangle has its own new legal description. So it would be called Part 1 on reference plan, blah, blah, blah. And it's that particular protection that gets implemented through a temporary heritage conservation easement agreement. So what that does is it does a few things that's beneficial for both the town and the Cherry Hill Club. It gives that shared recognition of the heritage value that we've already talked about. It provides interim protection, but in perpetuity. And what that means is this easement agreement will apply the protections that the town wants forever until the club achieves a couple of criteria. In this case, they want to do additions to the rear of the clubhouse, so that section you don't see from the street, potentially to the side, sympathetically, and then interior additions which don't normally apply to designation bylaws anyways, but they want the flexibility to do that prior to a designation bylaw. Now, the town's hands were tied a little bit because Bill 23 and Bill 200 forced some timelines. So we needed to figure out a solution to get past those timelines, and what this temporary easement agreement does is it allows the town that protection while not designating the property. So you still get the same impact, but the town gets to go worry-free from having this property drop off the register, and Cherry Hill Club still gets the opportunity to do the additions and the interior renovations that they had planned. It also defines a very small protected area, like we talked about before, keeping the golf course away from the need to go to the Heritage Committee and get a permit every time you make a change. And then the trigger for lifting that temporary, so you're probably questioning, what does it mean to be temporary? So in this case, the transition mechanism to go from temporary to designation is that the site plan agreement, a site plan application process be either nearly completed or mostly completed so that the Cherry Hill Club can achieve their work. And then they would, on their own accord, ask to apply a Part 4 designation bylaw to the same part on that reference plan, lifting the conservation easement agreement. And we've negotiated and provided the temporary easement agreement with our lawyers, the Cherry Hill Club's board of directors, and the town staff and town solicitor, and everyone has reviewed and agreed. And so if you recall a couple slides back, I pointed to the ARA attributes. We've negotiated to be a little bit more specific. It's very important in heritage bylaws that you're very specific about what's being protected. And in some cases, this actually improves upon the ARA conditions. And in other cases, it is just a bit more explicit on which exact facades that this protection would apply. So you can see we've added directions to the facades to be very clear. The reason we do that is because you folks may not be here in 10 or 15 years as councillors. Some of the constituents in the Heritage Committee may have moved on, may have new committee members, staff may move on. We need to be clear to future councillors and committee members what is being protected and what's at stake, so that way the ownership from Cherry Hill Club doesn't get lost in the confusion as you go through the process. This is an example of the reference plan, as you can see. This generally follows the area around the clubhouse with a little bit of buffer on either edge. What it excludes, you'll see this sort of north arrow there, that's the pro shop. The pro shop is not included as part of the designation. It was not identified in the ARA report as significant. So our plan has already been prepared and is being deposited by our surveyor now. And it generally follows what you see here in blue. So essentially what would be protected as we move forward is everything in this dashed white area and the semicircular driveway, so that way future residents of Fort Erie, yourselves and the Cherry Hill Club can see what they see today in perpetuity. So in conclusion, we have read through the staff report and agree with staff's recommendations. In fact, I would say this has been a very open and courteous process. This is not afforded to all property owners in every municipality, and I would like to thank Kimberlyn and her colleague Edward for giving a very thoughtful process to a landowner who is important to the community. And lastly, we would recommend that Town Council approve the temporary heritage conservation easement agreement as negotiated and agreed to by all parties dated January 20th. And that's everything. And here to answer any questions. I know this is a bit of a complicated bit of legislation and tool, but available to answer anything you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sugden. Does any member of council have questions?
I'll jump into here with one question, and that is, you mentioned doing these reports and studies for other clients in other municipalities. Was I correct in hearing that this is the first time you've seen this approach to a heritage designation that you've worked on?
Through the mayor to Councillor Lewis, thank you. That is a great question. It is not my first time implementing a temporary heritage conservation easement agreement. I've done it one other time in Grimsby, coincidentally also in Niagara. Very infrequently in any other area of Ontario have I seen this. It is a tool available to us. Most people take the strong approach of going to a permanent heritage conservation easement agreement or a permanent bylaw without any consultation or open dialogue between the landowner and the municipality. We currently have four other, I think, 3 or 4 other similar circumstances that we're negotiating right now, but not firmed up. So it is quite novel.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice night, everybody.
And there being no other presentations or delegations, we'll move on to reports. The first report is PBBS 18-2025, Temporary Heritage Conservation Easement Agreement, 912 Cherry Hills Boulevard North. Councillor Lewis moves. Your Worship.
Yeah, Chair, I just want to thank Cherry Hill and the people that we've been dealing with their consultant. Certainly our staff, Kimberlyn Smith and Edward Terry, and our consultant. This is, I think, a very refreshing way in which this whole issue has been dealt with. I think it addresses the concerns of a number of councillors in terms of how we get to a designation status on a piece of property that's great significance. So congratulations all around, and obviously I support the report. Thank you.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo what His Worship had just said. You know, being on the committee and having an opportunity to look at these when they first come in and how the process works out, how we negotiate to come to a final conclusion that benefits both parties. I mean, I sat in, I think it was the PBBS, so I gotta get used to saying that. I still want to say PDS, the subcommittee meeting. And my first thought that came to my mind was, you know, we're moving, you know, quickly to designate these properties, but at the same time, we're also looking in a sensitive way to the needs of the individual owners. And we had another similar situation. We had a presentation from another fairly prominent property steward in town. And I think this just goes to show, I hope everyone looks at this, that, you know, we try to find ways to preserve what's important and the characteristics that, you know, give the value to the built heritage in our community. And this is an excellent example of how, with a little bit of discussion, a little bit of coming together with staff and with, you know, the various consultants and the property owners, that we can find a way that everyone wins. And certainly knowing Cherry Hill, knowing the historic place it has in the community, I think this is something that may benefit them. You know, get the town plaque out there, you know, saying it's a heritage designated, like once we get along to that point. It's nice to see this happening, and I'm glad we were able to work together on finding a compromise. So thank you very much to everyone who was involved. I'm very happy to see this. I'll be supporting this with bells on, so thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Lewis?
I just wanted to say I say what they just said, so.
Okay.
Ditto.
All right. That being said, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any not in favor? Okay. Carried. The next report under consideration is PBBS 19-2025, the extension of draft plan approval for Creekside Estates subdivision 0-12799 Nye Road. Can I have a mover, please? Your Worship. The report is on Your Worship.
Yeah, I'm happy to put this on the floor. I just have some observations about this. The first is that I find it hard to believe that anyone investing the amount of money that would be put into this type of initiative would allow it to lapse. I find that fascinating. However, I also have made mistakes in my life, so I appreciate that. This would be the seventh extension. If there'd been an extension granted in April of 2023 for 2 years, this would then be the seventh extension. I'm not opposed to, in principle, the recommendation made by staff, because it is a lot of money. There has been a lot of work, apparently more recently, but the owner has had this property for 5 years. And I know there was a pandemic in between, and it looks like most of the outstanding conditions that need to be met are going to be met, I would think, in a matter of course. I know that there's been some design work on Nye Road that has delayed some of the other work, and apparently that's approaching completion. Can I just get confirmation on that we're getting close to?
Through you, Chair, to your worship, the design work is nearing completion. We're just going back and forth with the developer's consultant. It is budgeted in prior years, however, it's development charge funded, and there's some funding things we need to figure out, but we are working actively on that project.
Right. I like the design of the development. It's a pleasant relief not to see more townhouses, but that doesn't mean that the owner couldn't reapply to change the content of this. So the only part that I really am not in agreement with the staff on is the extent of the extension. I'm not prepared personally to extend this for another 3 years, but that would mean that anybody who was a child when the initial approval was given in 2011 would have graduated from high school. And I think that that's more time than is necessary. I would, and I have had conversation with Mr. Yamarino about this, I'd originally thought, because of the presentations made, that the developer is moving towards getting final approval. I thought maybe October of 2026. I'm prepared, but if we go along with this and deem the development not to have lapsed, apparently there's only one extension, and that's this one right now. On that basis, I'm prepared to go to April of 2027, which is 2 years from now. It's a further 2 years. It will be a total of 16 years since this was first approved. I think that's more than enough. And so I'd like to move an amendment that instead of March 17th, 2028, it be April the 11th, 2027, in the second paragraph of the recommendation.
Can I get a seconder?
Don't need
Councillor
one in
Lewis?
committee.
Oh,
Don't need one in committee.
okay. Are there any questions, comments? Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm generally agreeable with this, and His Worship kind of dated me because I will have one of those children who are coming very close to graduating high school in 2028. And yeah, it's a reminder every day of how old I'm getting, and I see the gray hair on my head too. Just on that note, with regards to reducing the time, and I'm agreeable to it, but I'm just wondering if staff have any comment if that would provide sufficient time to meet all the requirements. I just don't want to put someone in a difficult position of them having to come back and ask and do all that. If we can maybe, get ahead of it now and find out where we're going to be.
Mr. Yamarino?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Dubanow. 2 years should be sufficient. However, things change. The conditions haven't currently all been cleared. So, there could be hiccups later on in the process. So I can't say for certain that it would be, but it should be enough time.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, and if I may, Madam Chair, just with respect to conditions, is there anything that could, the road right now tends, at least in my opinion anyway, that seems to be the one big thing we're waiting for. But, barring that, are there any conditions that, in staff's opinion, could potentially be an issue? I'm just trying to get some information here, just to make an informed decision. I'm agreeable to this. I think it is a good idea to, kind of hold feet to the fire, especially when, when we want to see housing built. We don't want to see things drag on for decades. But I want to give everyone a fair shake. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that could potentially, with respect to conditions, potentially hold anything up. Just spitball it if you don't mind.
Again, through the mayor to Councillor Dubanow. There's no glaring red flags or any that I may, point out. But a lot of these a lot of these clearances are circulated to other agencies, other town departments. Some of them are more technical in nature. So a lot of that would depend on review from, engineers, potentially the region. So again, I can't say for certain, but there's no glaring red flags at this time.
And one last question, if I may, Madam Chair, and through you. With respect to planning authority delegating from the region back to the municipality at the end of this month, would any conditions that would have required clearance by the region, would they then default to the municipality, the local municipality to clear once that planning authority changes?
Through the mayor to Councillor Dubanow, that is a possibility, yes.
I'll be supporting the mayor's amendment. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I'm going to support this. I think we do have to put their feet to the fire, because if you ask them, would 3 years be better? I'm sure the answer is going to be, of course. My one concern is that I know that it's probably not within their control, or our control is in regards to capacity for the sewers, because that came up not that long ago. It's kind of the same area, that there may not be capacity, some changes have to be made, and the region, the other report said they, hopefully in 2026, but budget may prevent this. So that's the one thing they won't have control over, and I don't think they're guaranteed sewer capacity at this point.
Mr. Amory? Or Mr. Frost?
Want to take it? Sure.
Through you, Madam Chair. We assign capacity, whether it be at the sanitary sewer local level or at the pump station at the time of building permit and connections made. So capacity is never actually guaranteed to any developer coming on stream. What we can do is, with our trenchless rehabilitation program to reduce inflow and infiltration in our sanitary sewers, is as things move down the line, we will be looking at the Nye Road sewer shed and ways to reduce the extraneous flows, which will offset treating rainwater for increased capacity of sanitary sewage. So we can do our part in the next few years after our other push in our Catherine Street area to free up capacity, if you may. When it comes to Niagara Region, we're always at the whim of the pump station capacities, and we do the best as we can to push that and identify these strategic growth areas through things like our official plan to really put the emphasis of these are our key areas we're focusing on, rather than everything is key. So that kind of change in philosophy, I think, will help us put that pressure to show them where we're trying to grow and help them balance their budget. So,
Your Worship.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear. My understanding is that the allocation of sewage capacity is distinct from the developer moving towards final approval of a draft plan of subdivision, so that the developer can proceed, get the final approval, and then apply for the capacity for sewage. Is that correct?
to you, Madam Chair, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Noyes, did you have?
No, I'm fine with that explanation. Thank you.
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In this report, staff has recommended a 3-year extension and indicates that another extension cannot be made. Is it the time that cannot be extended, or is it the fact that one extension cannot be done? So I'm asking if it's a 2-year extension, is there still the option for another year extension, or is it the number of extensions? Thank you.
Through Madam Chair, I don't want to get too technical, but under the Planning Act, extensions fall under a different section than what council would be approving as a final lapsing date tonight. So under the typical provision under the Planning Act where extensions are provided, they would no longer be able to qualify for an extension under that provision. Therefore, no extensions would be permitted after this final extension.
Okay, I think I got it. Thanks.
There appearing to be no further comments or questions. I'll call the amendment made by the mayor. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now to the back to the report itself. Are there any further questions or comments? So I will call the question for the report as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. That ends the reports for this evening. We now move on to new business or inquiries. Are there any? Councillor Dubanow?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to raise an issue with staff. I had a resident reach out to me regarding our active transportation master plan. And during the process, we had some dialogue. I think we had a good conversation about some of the items that were in it and some of our forward thinking. But one of the items that the resident had mentioned, just with the changes in the town, some of the differences since even the master plan was put in place, which I think we approved it during my first term of council. But there's even been so much growth and so much change since then. I'm just wondering if maybe staff could either comment now or perhaps even provide a memo to us later on about perhaps reestablishing the Active Transportation Advisory Committee. I think it's a good idea to always have that kind of input, particularly from those who are active in cycling, using our trail systems, and even pedestrians moving around town. I understand why we, for lack of a better word, disbanded the committee, because we did complete the Active Transportation Master Plan. I'm of the opinion that these are living documents that we always need to look at and always need to look at, amend, change, and then incorporate into a new master plan when the time warrants. So maybe perhaps, not even a comment now, but maybe just get a memo back to us about what would be involved, maybe some of the reasons why it didn't make sense to have it, and whether it makes sense to reestablish it now.
Ms. Giammarino, and perhaps you could also comment on if it's feasible, the time the report would come back, or the memo.
Through you, Madam Chair. I haven't previously been involved in the active transportation master plan, but I can certainly take that back to our team and we can discuss. We can certainly bring back a memo. As for timing, the end of May.
Thank you. Okay. Your Worship.
I just want a clarification with respect to some of the rules that came out of the province with respect to designating heritage properties, the registry, what have you. Is there anything that prohibits a municipality at this stage of the game from adding potentially new properties to the registry for future designation?
Through Madam Chair to the Mayor, no, there's nothing that would stop it, as long as it goes through the process under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Right, and that would be something that our museum or heritage committee would typically be engaged in?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other councillors have new business or inquiries? All right. Then the next item is the business status report. Are there any questions or comments with respect to that? There appearing to be none. Your Worship, that concludes the business planning, building, and bylaw services committee. I turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Christensen. That takes us to infrastructure services. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Infrastructure Services is now in session. There are no presentations or delegations tonight. That takes us to reports. First one is 10.2.1 IS 032025 Bay Beach Summary and Usage Policy Review, Stand-Up Paddleboard, SUP, and kayak use. Can I get a mover for the...
It's already on the floor, but I'm wondering whether we need to have the memo moved.
I thought that's what I thought I was doing.
Moving the memo?
Moving the memo, because we've dealt with the other.
I think you're right. I think that's correct, so I'll be of
I like it
assistance.
when you say that. Okay, so are you moving the report or
I'm
just
moving
saying I'm right?
I'm moving the memo,
Okay,
and I'll say that you are correct, that needs to be moved.
perfect. And
So-
music to my ears, His Worship has seconded the memo. Any questions or comments?
I've moved the memo.
Move the memo. Thank you. By the end of it, we'll figure out what we're doing. Any questions or comments? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I'm just looking at like the report and then the memo that comes after that. I have no problem with the kayaks and the paddle boards going onto the beach, but I do want it to be a designated area. Now, the report refers to it in both places as an alternative. So I would want the alternative to be part of it, that I would choose that there has to be a designated area for where they are and where they're kept, because they do take up a lot of room. I have no problem with the timing or anything else like that when they're on there, but I do think it has to be a designated area. And
I'm just going to pause there and let staff maybe speak to the reason why we didn't go with the designated area over one being included. I don't know if you have any comments.
Yeah, through you, Chair. We had previously looked at designation or restrictions of times for the usage, which I understand you're okay with, as one alternative when we would allow basically free reign along the beach to use your SUPs or your kayaks anywhere along the beach, recognizing it's not peak times of beach usage. So the designated area maybe wasn't seen as required during those quote unquote off-peak beachgoer times. And that's simply why it wasn't put forth as needed at this point in time.
okay, I respectfully disagree. I do think there needs to be a designated area where the paddle boards and the kayaks go in, because if they can go anywhere on the beach, I think you need it. I mean, there's a lot of kids there. Even though it might be a Tuesday or a Wednesday, if it's a hot Tuesday or a hot Wednesday and the kids are off, there's a lot of people at that beach. So I do think there needs to be a designated area. And sure. Okay, well, at this point, I would put, no, there's not a report. The report has an alternative, so I would move that we go forward with the alternative. Now I'm trying to find it again. I don't like this computer.
I'm also not seeing any other comments or questions from council with your concern, if that helps in terms of maybe counting for votes on an amendment.
Again, I think there needs...
And the CAO has...
Thank you, through the chair. I might propose that the issue could be monitored through the summer, and if there is a problem arising, that staff maybe bring forward a memo to restrict them to a certain area if they happen to be problematic as things move forward, just as one option.
Well, I can see that as long as it's, but if there's not a bylaw in place and it takes time for it to come back, at least give the staff some authority to implement it if it's needed. Because let's say there is a problem on July 1st. By the time it comes back to council, it may be August before we'll be able to implement it. If there, like I said, I just give the staff some power to implement it if they need to be. You can phrase it any way you want. But again, I would hate to see a group of 8 kayakers or paddleboarders coming together as a group, which is fine if they're setting up here, but it's not fine if they're setting up all over the beach.
Your comments have been noted. I see the mayor wants to respond or enter into the discussion. So,
Well, just in support of what the CAO has mentioned, July 1st, they wouldn't be allowed on the beach except before 11 o'clock and after 6 o'clock in the evening. And that's going to be the case every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and holiday. So that there may be warm days during the week, for sure, but the staff has indicated they've explained why in the report. There'd have to be signage, there'd have to be monitoring, what have you. That, so from my perspective, I'm quite happy to implement the changes that are recommended for paddleboarding and monitor the situation and see what transpires. And I don't want to make it any more complicated than is necessary at this stage of the game. So I'm not prepared to, because staff thinks that it's going to be problematic, I'm not prepared to put in an additional requirement when I think we can go forward, see what happens. And there is, I'll grant, Councillor Noyes, I grant your concern that if a problem does arise, there may be a lag in us being able to address that. I'm prepared to wait and see.
Any other comments or questions before I go back to Councillor Noyes? Councillor Dubanow?
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe to help alleviate some of the concern with this, maybe the CAO can comment about, what kind of discretion staff at the beach may have with regard to maintaining safety and other such issues. I would imagine even if we have a policy in place, if it does become a crowding issue or a safety issue, that the staff who monitor the beach would have discretion to make things safer or operate in an orderly fashion. And I'm just wondering if maybe the CAO can comment on that to alleviate those concerns.
CAO McQueen?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Dubanow. I may move the question over to Mr. Frost to speak specifically, but we do have our municipal law enforcement officers who patrol the beaches, control access, restrict admission if the limits are reached, and oftentimes by law or they intervene if there's any issues of enforcement or any rules being broken. That would be first point of enforcement. So we do have the tools there for any rules or regulations we may have in place. Mr. Frost may wish to elaborate on that.
Mr. Frost?
Through you, Chair. I would just add that our beach staff often do try to take a collaborative approach with the beachgoers, communicate, hey, this is being a bit of an issue. Do you think maybe we could have you move over there before going to that enforcement level to try and keep things lighthearted and easygoing? So our staff can be talked to about, if you see this happening, maybe we direct them to kind of move on to the side, create space for other users who don't have the kayaks or supboards as part of that monitor, see how things go before putting in proper signage, enacting bylaws, and then having to enforce that.
Councillor Noyes?
Well, fair enough. I'm just hoping to not have a problem that we're going to regret not putting in some safeguards earlier.
Any other questions or comments to the memorandum? Seeing none, all those in favor of receiving? Carried.
Do the report now.
Sorry. Five on the floor. Any questions or questions or comments to the report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Now moving on to 10.2.2 IS 082025, information regarding update on Garrison Road sanitary servicing. Your worship, you move the report. Yep. Any questions or comments, your worship?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the excellent quality of this report. I think it's very helpful, provided a lot of information that I would have been looking for and was interested in. Certainly gives us a good overview of where we're heading with respect to trying to meet the sewage capacity needs in these two catchment areas. And just wanted to make sure that Mr. LeMay is, actually I ran into him in the hallway, I told him it was a good report, but if it comes from his boss, it probably means more to him. So please pass that on.
I think staff have taken note. Any other, Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And similar sentiment, this was very helpful. I know I gave notice of motion about this earlier. This kind of accommodates what I was looking for. It gave some timetables and some indication of where this was going. So I can more formally withdraw my notice at a more appropriate time. But this definitely met what I was looking for. I did have some questions though, and I had an opportunity to have conversations with actually two different developers in the area, not so much on the west side, but more on the east side, which would be the Catherine Street catchment rather than the Alliston catchment on the other side. And this is maybe more of a question for maybe the planning side as well as the infrastructure side, but one of the individuals I spoke with when I expressed the timetables in the report, they were, you know, that's kind of where they would look to go anyway with the way the market is right now. The concern that they had was about the nature of the holding provision and what that prevents them to do relative to when they actually have occupancy of the buildings. And you know, maybe, I don't know if this is something we can get an answer for tonight. Maybe this is something we can look at in a more substantive way later on. But I'm wondering if maybe we can optimize what's going on here. Maybe we can move the process forward on the planning and development side simultaneously with the infrastructure works that are being done. You know, whether we can do site plan approvals or site servicing or other things to get ahead of the game, knowing that we are putting these works in place. We do have a timetable for when we expect them to be completed. So that way, when they are completed and we actually do get those numbers and that we know we're able to accommodate it, that it's just a matter of flipping the switch, then we start getting shovels in the ground, getting these houses constructed and occupied. So I don't know if that's something either you know, the planning side or the infrastructure side wants to comment on, but that was one issue that was raised with me by one of the interested parties in this area, and it's something they'd like to have more discussion about. So I just don't know if there's any comment this evening or if it's something we can take forward.
Mr. Frost?
Through you, Chair. Essentially, what we're going to be looking at is a staged approach where we're going to incrementally find that capacity. And that's not to say at the end of a 3-year period, everyone just go. We're going to start to look at each year the before and after effect of our program to reduce the I&I in our sewers. And if we find that we reduced the I&I by 50 liters per second or whatever the number may be, that will give us a hold on how many of those developments that have a hold can be pushed forward at that time. Because the idea is, while there's the pump station has capacity, we can still look at what are we contributing to our sewers today? And as long as we maintain that same flow, there's no net increase, and we can start approving developments within those realms so that we're not further surcharging, potentially flooding more basements, but we're kind of maintaining that status quo while allowing development to go forward.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, and I'm actually very happy to hear that because there are a number of individuals who've been held up. You know, it's going on years now, and it's understandable. Like, we have to have working infrastructure. We can't, you know, overload our sewer systems, which impacts the existing residents. We all get that, but at the same time, you know, people are investing money. They're holding mortgages. They're trying to get a return on their investment and also provide housing that we know the community needs, particularly single-family housing, which is what we're talking about right now. So I'm glad to hear that. Certainly, I think on the planning side that I know that there have been some requests for some meetings to get some clarification on it. I'm happy with what I'm hearing this evening, because even if we can open this up incrementally, I know there are some other developments that are fairly large in the area that may not move forward on the original timetable as envisioned. You know, large multi-floor buildings, other things like that, that may get pushed back a little. So I'm just hoping we can find a way to optimize this process. And even if we're just waiting to get the official number, if we anticipate that it's going to get to a certain point, that we can run these in parallel, so that we aren't waiting until we get it. You know, we can go on the assumption, and then if the assumption doesn't play out, then we can kind of back off and hold off, rather than waiting until we get to the end and then we have to start that whole infrastructure side on site servicing. So those were my comments. Very happy to see this because it's been a bit of a hold up for some of the homes in the area, and I'm glad we're moving forward. So thank you to all the staff. It was very nice to see this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any items of new business? Seeing none, I lost my screen here. Business status report. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I will turn the chair back over to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lewis. That takes us then to Corporate and Community Services. Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Corporate and Community Services now in session. We don't have any presentation or delegations tonight. No reports on the agenda. Any new business inquiries? Seeing none, we are rocking along. Business status report. Any questions? Well, Your Worship, that's the way we do it here in Corporate and Community Services.
Presentations, no delegations, no reports, no new business, nothing on the business status report. Any bananas?
No bells.
No bananas. No, okay. Scheduling of meetings. Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tomorrow, the Fort Erie Public Library Board of Directors will meet at 4:30 at Centennial Library Branch.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Noyes.
There's a meeting tomorrow night for the Greater Niagara Animal Control. I think it's on 4th Avenue, probably at 6 o'clock.
Any others? Then Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to move that council and committee adjourn this evening at 8:27 p.m.
We'd like to accept. All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. Thank you all.